Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be taking you through assignment 1. What I'm going to be doing is going through the questions, going through the rubrics, and just highlighting some of the important points. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking this down into videos for each individual question so that you can watch a shorter video for the question you are working on. But first, I want to go over some of the general expectations and instructions for this assignment. So this assignment is out of 100 marks, and the total hours that you should be spending are 10 hours. Now, you don't need to have a stopwatch, you don't need to be timing that, but if you are spending 3 full days doing nothing but working on this assignment, you are probably spending too much time on it. And if you've done it and you completed it in an hour, well, you definitely do need to go back and do some revision, do some editing, and spend a little bit more time on it. So that is just a guideline for you. Now, the main things I want to draw your attention to on this page is the fact that no material can be copied from original sources, even if referenced correctly, unless it is a direct quote indicated with quotation marks. So you can quote, but if you are using something directly from a source without changing anything, it has to be in quotation marks and you have to reference it correctly. If you get an idea from a source, so even if you put it into your own words, you must include a reference. So please check your referencing guide. That is something that you need to keep with you at all times when you're doing any assignments, and you just follow the instructions there. And you may not quote more than 10%. And I'm going to just let you know that even quoting 10% is far too much, but if you quote more than 10%, then the assignment is really relying far, far too heavily on other people's work. So we can't accept it. So just keep an eye on your quoting and your paraphrasing. You must submit your assignment through Turnitin, and please save a copy of your assignment before submitting it. So if anything happens, you have a saved copy. Your assignments are going to be typed, and you need to make sure you are referencing correctly. And this is an individual assignment, so you can't work on this together as partners or as a group. I'm sure you can bounce ideas off each other in a general way, but it is your own work. Please, please take time to go through the IIE's AI policy. You are allowed to use AI, but there are certain ways that you are required to use it, and you are required to reference it. So please make sure you are familiar with that and that you are using AI responsibly if you choose to use it. If you are in any doubt, I would suggest just not using AI and just doing your own work. That way you don't have to run the risk of falling afoul of the AI policy. Now, something that is really, really, really important about these these assignments, every single one of them, is the deadline. Now, the deadline is an absolute cutoff. So that is 23:59 on the day it is due. So 1 minute to midnight. Now, this is a computer system that accepts it. So if you submitted 30 seconds past the deadline, it is going to be flagged as late. There is nothing any of your lecturers can do about it. That is the policy, that is the system. It's a bit like the end of the comrades, heartbreaking, but you know, when that gun goes off, it's done, it's finished. It doesn't matter how close you are to the line. So please, please, please give yourself enough time to submit before that deadline, because life happens. There are things like load shedding, your computer breaks, the system is really, really slow and lagged. So you might upload it half an hour before the deadline, but it's taking 35 minutes to upload. Unfortunately, that is still going to be counted as late. So you are really inviting trouble. So if possible, try and get it in the day before. So if there are any problems, your laptop crashes, the power is out for a full day, the system is incredibly lagged, you've got time to work through any of those issues. Please do save your work to the cloud, email it to yourself, save it somewhere other than just on your computer, because if it's just saved on your computer and something happens to your computer, your work is gone. If you find yourself in the really unfortunate position of you've submitted it and it just is not loading and it's just not going through in time, what you need to do is you need to take a screenshot to show that you are submitting, and that screenshot needs to include the time and date. There's no guarantee, but when you apply and you log a ticket with BC Assist, you can then have some proof that you were trying to submit it. I'm not saying that it's going to work, but it will at least help your case. Best case scenario, don't let that happen. Get it in well in time, and then you don't need to worry at all. So that's some of the housekeeping. So for this specific assignment, you should be able to discuss phonetics and phonology in speaking and language, discuss the importance of the core English skills, evaluate the different approaches to teaching literature in an to an FET class, analyze the application of hip-hop pedagogy and other culturally relevant pedagogy to the FET curriculum. So your assignment instructions, there are 3 individual questions. So please make sure you have answered all 3 questions. Your research requirements, you have your prescribed reading. So you've got the readings on ARC, the readings that are recommended in that in your ARC resources. You have the recommended readings, and you do have to do your own research. So please try as far as possible to use more academic sources. There is a place for ideas from blogs from teachers who are in the industry, but please do be very careful when selecting those resources. As I say, using the resources from industry experts is a good idea, but please do evaluate those resources very carefully, because this is an academic assignment that you are doing. So you really want to check, is everything spelled correctly? Is this in line with all the academic principles and the theoretical principles we've discussed? Things like, is everything spelled correctly? Those things. So you have to write academic paragraphs. You need to check the instructions to learners, and you need to create resources. And the referencing rubric will be applied. The IIE Harvard Anglia style must be followed, and the submission must be submitted through Turnitin. So that is your submission requirements. So question 1. There is no one typical South African English accent, as there is one overall Australian English accent. The variety of accents within society is in part a consequence of the varied regional origins of groups of native English speakers who came to Africa at different times, and in part a consequence of the variety of mother tongues of the different ethnic groups who today use English so extensively that they may be included in the English-using community. So, this is something we are very aware of, that there is no South African accent. We're all very aware that when you hear a South African character in a Hollywood movie, they have this sort of weird, almost Afrikaans accent. But if you think about it, you think about there's an Afrikaans accent, there is a English accent, there's a Durban accent, there's a Cape Town accent, there is an Indian accent, a Zulu accent, a Xhosa accent. There are so many different accents. You can generally have a vague idea of where someone comes from based on their accent. Now, if you go to Australia, most people just have an Australian accent. Whereas you come to South Africa, South African go, oh, that's a Cape Townian, or oh, that one definitely comes from Durban. So there are so many accents, and there are different reasons for this. So question 1 starts with, based on the above excerpt, discuss the importance of phonetics and phonology in speaking and language. In your discussion, look at the influence of the mother tongue on your grade 10 students, on how your grade 10 students pronounce some words. So there are a couple of things I really want you to take note of. The first is that based on the above excerpt. So you do have to look at what the excerpt is saying in your answer. So discuss the importance of phonetics and phonology in speaking and language. So you have to explain what phonetics is, explain what phonology is. Link each of those terms to the above excerpt and look at them in terms of speaking and look at them in terms of language. Part of your discussion is going to look at the influence of the mother tongue on how your grade 10 students pronounce some words. So we are looking at it in a very specific context. We are looking at it in the context of a grade 10 class and a grade 10 class with different mother tongues. So the phonetics and the phonology are going to have a huge impact on speaking and language. And part of that impact, part of the differences in phonetics and phonology is going to come from different mother tongues. So please make sure you have looked at all of those aspects in your answers. You've defined phonetics, you've defined phonology, you've based your discussion on what the excerpt has said. You've looked at this idea of grade 10s pronouncing words, and you have looked at it in terms of their mother tongue. So if we look at the rubric, discussion of phonetics and phonology, on the one end of the scale, we have limited or inaccurate understanding of phonetics and phonology. Discussion is superficial or incorrect. So you really want to avoid that end of the scale. Then you have demonstrates a clear and confident understanding of phonetics and phonology with insightful explanation. So what we really, really want to aim for is we are looking to try and go above just saying what phonetics and phonology is. You have to say what it is. You have to say what it is in relation to speaking and language, but you really want to try and pull your discussion up to make sure that your discussion of what these are is clear and confident. So you really need to understand what these terms are. And we really want an insightful discussion and explanation of phonetics and phonology in relation to speaking and language. So I don't just want something pulled out of a resource. I want you to add something to that discussion. Then the next part we're going to be looking at is the influence of mother tongue. So little or no discussion of mother tongue influence, or examples are inappropriate. All the way up to insightfully discusses mother tongue influence using well-chosen, contextually appropriate examples. So what you want to really focus on here is, number one, the discussion of the mother tongue influence on pronouncing words, and you need to provide relevant and accurate examples. So please remember those examples. And then use of the provided excerpt, minimal or no reference to the given excerpt, all the way up to integrates the excerpt meaningfully and analytically into the discussion. So in between, you're taking bits of the excerpt and you are mentioning them in your discussion. So that'll get you some marks. What we're really looking for is that elevation of taking your argument, taking something from the excerpt and showing how those two work together, how the excerpt substantiates your discussion. That is the ultimate goal of that section. So moving on to question 2, provide 6 words that are mispronounced in the South African context, but are regarded as the norm in our society. In no more than 6 sentences, reflect on the importance of understanding that individual accents are not necessarily a true reflection of an individual's command of the English language. So what we're looking for here, 6 words that South Africans mispronounce, or in a South African context, because as we are really looking at in this section is this idea of diversity. But in a South African context, there are certain words that we mispronounce. They are not pronounced correctly, but we consider that to be a perfectly acceptable pronunciation of the word. So you want to make sure you have identified 6 words, not 5, not 4, not 7, 6. And then you want to make sure your explanation is not more than 6 sentences. And that doesn't mean run-on sentences. So what we're also checking is, are you able to get the most important ideas through in a concise way? So we want to see, can you zero in on the most important points and only discuss those instead of writing, say, 12, 14, 20 lines to get 6 points across? So let's look at the rubric for that. So identification of mispronounced words, fewer than 6 words provided, or words are inappropriate or inaccurate, all the way up to 6 well-chosen and accurate examples that clearly reflect South African pronunciation norms. Okay, so that is, you're going to have to spend some time finding those words. The main challenge here is to just make sure that those words fulfill the criteria. Reflection on accents and language competence. So this idea that your accent does not reflect your language competence. So reflection is unclear and superficial, to clear reflection showing understanding that accent does not equate to language competence, to insightful, academically sound reflection that clearly articulates the distinction between accent and language competence. So what elevates your answer here is your ability to discuss in an academic way that clearly shows this distinction between accent and academic and language competence. So, we should know that your accent does not equate to your language competence. Are you just sort of saying that, or are you providing a thoughtful discussion on the matter? And in clarity and coherence, ideas lack clarity or coherence. Ideas are mostly clear and logical. Ideas are clearly articulated, coherent, and well-structured. So you only have 6 sentences. So one of the challenges you are going to set yourself is creating a really thoughtful, insightful discussion that's well-structured, but isn't longer than 6 sentences. So that's what you really want to challenge yourself to. Cutting out anything that isn't necessary, cutting out any extra information, and only focusing on the most important points. Now on to question 1.3. In a structured and academically sound paragraph, explain the importance of acknowledging diversity in the South African classroom. With examples, discuss the ways in which teachers accommodate diversity in the FET classroom. Remember to use the IIE Harvard Anglia style referencing method for your citations. So, the fact that it says in a structured and academically sound paragraph, and it tells you to use the Harvard Anglia style referencing method, means you have to do your own research on this. So part of what we're looking at is, have you researched? So we are looking at a paragraph. Now, it doesn't give you a specific length, but a paragraph is generally not more than about half a page. Half a page, 3/4 of a page at the absolute maximum. We are looking for things like, have you got a topic sentence? So a sentence that tells us what this paragraph is about. Are all your sentences clearly linked? So you're not just jumping from idea to idea without any logic or coherence. So you want to really just check that that paragraph is well structured, the ideas are explained clearly, you haven't put in any vague statements, you've provided some sort of substantiation for everything you've said. You need to provide examples. So we are looking for very specific examples. So you're not going to say something like, in an FET classroom, it's really important that when you do comprehensions, you provide various texts. Okay, it's not a bad example, but it's still very vague. What do you mean by various texts? What do you mean by when you're teaching comprehension? So you really want to specify what are some of the various texts that you could provide. Why are you providing various texts? You said it's important, but you haven't said why. So you really want to be specific, and your examples have to make sense. You know, you can't talk about phonetics, for example, in a writing lesson, because phonetics doesn't come into writing, it comes into speaking and listening. So you need to explain the importance of acknowledging diversity, and you need to look at how teachers can accommodate diversity. So there are so many examples of diversity. So you're looking at the importance of saying, okay, I've got diverse students, and you are now looking at the really practical ways that you can acknowledge that diversity and accommodate that diversity. So, understanding diversity is the first area you are looking at. Limited or inaccurate understanding of diversity in the South African classroom demonstrates a sound understanding of diversity in the South African classroom and demonstrates an insightful understanding of diversity. So you're not just mentioning what diversity is and how you can find it, you're providing some sort of intelligent discussion on the matter. Strategies to accommodate diversity, few, unclear, or impractical examples provided. So that's really what you want to avoid. You want to really avoid just putting in one example. You want to avoid putting in examples where I'm like, I'm not quite sure what you want me to do in the classroom, or else you're putting in really impractical suggestions. Something like, you're going to get every single student to create an AI chatbot to use in their exams, just off the top of my head. I can tell you that's not practical or feasible in any way. So you really want to take these examples and really integrate them into your discussion. So they need to be appropriate. They need to be well developed, practical, and contextually relevant. Remember, you're talking about a South African context. So you have to take in the various diversities, as well as the various constrictions that we have in the South African context. I just want to really re-emphasize that these examples must be practical. So these are the sort of things that you can implement in a classroom in South Africa, and they must be very, very specific. So you could say to someone, well, in this lesson that I saw you teach, I would suggest at this point in the lesson, you do this exact thing. And then they go into their next lesson and they know exactly what to do. So you really want to state what a teacher needs to do. And then for academic writing and referencing, paragraph lacks structure and or correct referencing. Paragraph is structured and uses referencing correctly. Paragraph is academically sound, well written, and accurately referenced. So we are looking at your writing ability as well. Can you write well? Can you write clearly? Is your discussion structured? Which brings us to the end of question 1. So in our next video, I'm going to go on to question 2.